Hey guys, Dr. Michael Young here. Hey, we are wrapping this baby up. We are finishing our course. This is the 15th of Michael's recorded lessons, and it's the last one that we're going to do. In this exciting lesson, we're talking about entry strategies. Entering both developing and emerging markets. They changed it. I noticed they changed the textbook. This particular edition, this is the 13th edition. In the 12th edition, they only called this market entry, but in the 13th edition, they called it entering developed and emerging markets. I guess that's because of the increasing importance of emerging markets. But anyway, this is a relatively straightforward topic. Whenever a firm is considering entering a foreign market, they have several things that they have to consider. For example, which foreign market do we enter? When do we enter them? And how big? What's the scale? Number two, how do we enter? That's what we're going to be talking about today is entry modes. The choice of entry modes. And then finally, a strategic alliance is a way that company can ally with a firm that's already there without actually entering themselves. This is something that I'm a little bit familiar with because when I was in China for 20 years, most of the time that I was there, the Chinese government required anybody that came into China to form a strategic alliance with an existing Chinese company. That has since changed because the World Trade Organization, as China got more developed, they quit making them do that. The World Trade Organization made them stop doing that. The reason the Chinese government was doing it was they wanted to learn as much as they could, and so there was a lot of technology transfer, and the foreign companies didn't like it, so that changed. Right, so here we go. Which foreign markets? You got to think about the nation's long-term profit potential. Some of this stuff we've already spent a good bit of time talking about in this class. How big is the market? How wealthy are its customers? What are the costs and risks of entering that market? What are the other companies that are already there? Is there a lot of competition? Do the native players, the indigenous companies, is it very competitive? Are they tough cookies to crack? First thing we're going to talk about is the timing. Should you enter, let's suppose you're an American company, all right? That's the most easiest thing that we can imagine. You're considering entering another market, and let's suppose that you're planning on going into an industry in which there are no real competitors in that particular country. So this is something that we study a lot in strategic management as well. You might have heard about first mover advantage, the term first mover advantage. Well, first mover advantage is if you're a first mover into a particular market, this allows you to establish a brand name. You have some advantage because you're there first. You can build market share. You can create switching costs that tie customers into their products and services. I used to do a case on Caterpillar, the earth-moving equipment company. And one of the things that Caterpillar did was, by being a first mover in earth-moving in many different countries, they established switching costs. It was very costly for the existing companies to switch to another provider of earth-moving equipment. Because once you start with a particular company, especially something like earth-moving, you get a relationship, parts, supply line, and so forth. So this is another advantage, is this switching costs. Of course, it's not all good, as you might have guessed. There are some disadvantages of being first mover. The enterprise has to devote a considerable amount of time to learn and establish. If a market is already established, it's easier to go in and go down the path that other companies have gone. If you're blazing a trail, that's more costly. It's riskier. There are costs with failure. There are costs involved with promoting and establishing a product offering, including costs educating customers. Regulations change in a way that might diminish the value of early interest investment. And you need to educate customers about your company's products. I could give you a real world example, a case that I wrote. It was a company called Pacific Coffee. Pacific Coffee was a Hong Kong based coffee company that wanted to move into China. And I interviewed the CEO, and he said, we're really happy that Starbucks is already there because, Chinese people are not, it's not natural for them to drink coffee. The traditional Chinese beverage of choice is tea. And so the fact that Starbucks went in there and educated customers actually made it easier. So if you're a first mover, think about coffee, selling coffee to China. That's going to be costly just getting them to try the product and to test the product. First of the entry modes that we're going to look at is the most easiest, the cheapest, but it also is the one that has the least possible reward. Exporting. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Just make them here in the good old USA and ship them over to wherever and sell them. Advantages of that? Well, you don't have to manufacture in the country in which you're operating. It might help the firm to achieve experience curve and location economies. If you have just one manufacturing location, you can have economies of scale. However, disadvantages of just simply exporting might not be appropriate if lower cost locations for manufacturing can be found abroad. Transportation costs, tariff barriers. This is a big one. Countries, we've talked about this quite a bit. Countries don't like to leave their markets uncontested. Whether they admit it or not, most countries put up some sort of trade barriers. And the local agents for marketing, sales, and service might have divided loyalties. Next one we're going to talk about is licensing. Put this out of the way here. Licensing is defined as granting rights to intangible property to another entity, such as patents, inventions, formulas, processes, designs, copyrights, and trademarks. So, when I was living abroad, I saw this quite a bit. There were several companies that would license Chinese companies to manufacture and sell product under their trademark or a patent or copyright. And the advantages of licensing, again, no development costs, and the risks associated with entering a foreign market don't have those costs. Firm might use it when it wants to participate in a foreign market, but is prohibited from doing so by barriers to investment. In other words, if the American company, excuse America and China, because this is more American companies think about doing business in China, well, the Chinese side may not allow them to invest directly. And so if they license a company that's already there to produce their product, then they can overcome that barrier to investment. It can be used when a firm possesses some intangible property that might have business applications, but it does not want to develop those applications itself. Okay. Disadvantages? Yeah, it's risky because you don't have control over your licensee as like if you do it yourself. It limits a firm's ability to coordinate strategic moves across countries by using profits earned in one country to support competitive attacks in another. There's a risk associated with licensing technological know-how to foreign companies. Big one is leakage. And there's been a lot of stories about U.S. companies going to China, licensing their technology, and that technology gets stolen. And then before you know it, the Chinese have established a competitor that is maybe not only selling in China, but also in other countries. Next one, franchising. Some of you may have heard of franchise. Usually, a lot of restaurants are franchised. A lot of the Dairy Queens are franchised. I happen to know the franchisee of the Dairy Queen in Eleanor. It's kind of a famous case. But I also, when I was a student, I was going to school with a franchisee of a Dairy Queen in Tees Valley. I guess that's still there on Tees Valley Road. I haven't been down through there in a while. But anyway, that's where you selling intangible property, normally a trademark, to the franchisee, but it insists that the franchisee agree to abide by strict rules as to how it does business. The advantages of that: you can experience lower costs and risks than opening a foreign market on its own. You can build a global presence quickly, but a problem with that, it inhibits the firm's ability to take profits out of one country to support competitive tax in another, and also, again, the quality control problem. The franchisee may not be keeping quality at the same standards that the franchisor, the owner of the copyright, think Dairy Queen, they may not be keeping up the quality at the level that the Dairy Queen organization wants. Next one is a joint venture, or JV, cooperative undertaking between two firms. It's where it's like if you got a company from China and a company from the U.S., they go together and they build a third company. This is a joint venture company, and each side might own 50%. 50-50, in fact, happens to be the most common arrangement. So there was a company that I did a case on. I wrote a case on many years ago. Chrysler Corporation started a joint venture company in China with a company called Beijing Jeep, and they began selling Chrysler Jeeps in China. But the new venture that they started, it wasn't Chrysler, it wasn't Beijing Jeep Corporation, it was another company, a third company. Well, actually, that company was called Beijing Jeep Corporation. I think it was First Auto Works of Beijing, something like that, the one that on the Chinese side. Advantages: local partners' knowledge, shared costs and risks, possible political considerations, government interference, nationalism, etc. However, the disadvantages: again, that technology thing keeps popping up here. Whenever you have another company involved and you're sharing your technology, showing them how to do it, you risk losing that control over that technology. You might lack control over your subsidiaries, that you might not realize the experience curve or location economies can lead to conflicts and battles for control between the investing firms, and their goals and objectives change, or if they take different views as to what strategy should be. Next one we're going to talk about is wholly owned subsidiary. There was a special type. Well, the term used to be wholly owned foreign enterprise, and the acronym was WOFE. And a WOFE is a wholly owned subsidiary, a wholly owned foreign enterprise, and this is where a firm owns 100%. This can be a greenfield venture. Greenfield means you go out into a green field and you build a new plant. Sort of like the Nucor steel plant in Mason County. That's definitely a greenfield venture. If you saw the local news, you saw the eyewitness news team down there and they showed this green cornfield. Well, that's a greenfield venture. That's where you build everything from the ground up. That's different than if you would acquire an established firm in the host nation. So greenfield venture or acquisition, and it's where a firm owns 100% of the subsidiary. The advantages: you got control over everything. You got control over technology. You got control over operations. You get the location and experience curve, and you get 100% of the profits. Problems: risky, very risky. If it doesn't succeed, then you bear the full extent of that loss. There are risks in conducting business in a new culture. There can be other problems associated with acquisitions that outweigh the benefits. If you take a strategic management course from me, we spend a lot of time talking about mergers and acquisitions, and what makes them successful, what makes them fail. Table 15.1 shows the advantages and disadvantages, all of these things in one single table. You've got the exporting, the advantages. You know what? I'm just gonna. You got the advantages and disadvantages of exporting and turnkey contracts, which we already talked about. You've got the advantages and disadvantages of licensing and franchising. You've got the advantages and disadvantages of JVs. Disadvantages here. And then the WOOFIes, or the wholly owned subsidiaries, or the wholly owned foreign enterprises. Alright then. Different types of strategic alliances include cross-shareholding deals, is a type of strategic alliance where you might have, I buy some of your shares, you buy some of my shares. It's called a cross-shareholding deal. A licensing arrangement, a formal joint venture, or an informal cooperative arrangement. All of those are different types of strategic alliances. The advantages of strategic alliances? Well, it's quick. Boom. Easier. Allows firms to share fixed costs. Brings together complementary skills and assets that either company could easily do on its own. Strategic alliances happen all the time. Even if you were at the Toyota presentation the week before last, they said that Toyota is engaged in a lot more strategic alliances than what they were before, because different companies might bring different things to the table. And so this might help the firm establish technological standards for the industry that will benefit the firm. Disadvantages of strategic alliances: it might give competitors a low-cost route to new technology and markets. Think of the China case. It may generate short-term profits, but the result is to hollow out U.S. firms, leaving them with no competitive advantage in the global marketplace. If you bring in someone that starts doing everything that you should be doing yourself, you forget how to do it. There were examples of a lot of that happened during the 70s and 80s and 90s. And so that's the final one. Alright? Hey guys, this is Michael. Last time, I'm going to say, stay awesome